The days after my husband's funeral were a blur of grief, disbelief, and exhaustion. Jason had been my partner, my confidant, and my world for over a decade. And suddenly, he was gone. Friends and family tried to comfort me, but nothing seemed to pierce the hollow ache inside. I barely slept, barely ate, and often found myself staring at the walls of our home, replaying memories and imagining a future that would never come. It was my sister, Laura, who first suggested that I come to her son's first birthday party. I hesitated, feeling unworthy of celebration, still wrapped in mourning. But she insisted, gently but firmly. "He'll love to see his aunt," she said. "You need a little joy. You need to see life moving forward." I agreed, though with a heavy heart, determined to go not for celebration, but for my nephew, the only bright spark in the midst of my grief. The day of the party, I dressed carefully, choosing a soft, comforting outfit, and tried to summon some energy to mask the hollow ache inside. When I arrived, the backyard was a riot of color. Balloons, banners, and children's laughter filling the air. Families clustered around tables of food, and the smell of cake and barbecue mingled with the warmth of sunlight. I was greeted warmly by a few cousins and family friends, but as soon as Laura noticed me, her expression shifted. She smiled, but there was a tension in her eyes I hadn't seen before, a subtle calculation. "I'm glad you made it," she said, her tone polite. Almost clipped, I watched as my nephew toddled around, giggling and reaching for the decorations, unaware of the layers of adult emotions swirling around him. I tried to focus on him, on the innocence of the moment, hoping that his joy could pierce the cloud of grief I carried. Then, mid-party, Laura called me over. "I have something to tell you," she said, pulling me aside. My heart tightened. I had expected sympathy, perhaps a comforting word, but what she said next shocked me to my core. I need to be honest," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "You need to know. Jason had been seeing someone." Time seemed to stop. The laughter, the balloons, the chatter of children faded into a distant echo. My mind struggled to process her words. Jason, my husband, the man I had loved and trusted, had been unfaithful? Even now, after his death, the revelation hit like a tidal wave, adding betrayal to grief in a cocktail of unbearable pain. Laura continued, "It wasn't long-term, and it ended before he passed. But I thought you should know. You deserve to know the truth." I stood frozen, my thoughts a whirlwind. I felt anger, disbelief, hurt, and a strange icy numbness all at once. My nephew's giggle cut through the fog briefly, reminding me that life still moved forward even as I stumbled through its cruelty. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply nodded, forcing a composure I didn't feel. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I appreciate your honesty." Laura's expression softened, regret shadowing her features. "I wanted to protect you from this, but I realized you had a right to know." "I'm sorry." I wandered back to my nephew, forcing myself to focus on him, on the small joys that still existed despite the devastation in my heart. I played with him, guided him through balloon games, and helped him blow out the candles, each moment a small, painful reminder that life continued even when mine felt shattered. The rest of the party became a balancing act between grief and presence. I laughed when required, offered smiles to friends and family, and participated in the celebration of life in its youngest form, my nephew's first year. But underneath the surface, the shock of Laura's revelation simmered, altering the lens through which I viewed my past, my husband, and even my own mourning as the day ended. And I drove home. I reflected on the events. The party had reminded me of life's continuity, its unexpected joys, and its cruel surprises. The revelation of Jason's infidelity did not diminish my love for him or erase the years we had shared, but it forced me to confront a truth I had not anticipated. that even in death, people are imperfect, and life carries complexities that we cannot always control. That night, I cried silently in my bedroom, not just for Jason, but for the layered grief of love, betrayal, and the realization that life does not pause for mourning. And yet, amidst the heartbreak, I felt a spark of resilience. I had survived the funeral, the shock of betrayal, and now the challenge of reconciling memories with reality. I was learning, painfully, that grief and revelation can coexist, shaping us, strengthening us, and forcing us to redefine our understanding of love and trust. In the weeks that followed, I began to process the information, reaching out to friends for support, writing down my feelings, and slowly learning to integrate this shocking truth into my life without letting it define me. The birthday party, once a moment of joy, had become a pivotal point in my journey. A moment of confrontation with reality, a lesson in resilience, and a reminder that even in grief, life continues to demand attention, presence, and strength. By the time my nephew celebrated his second birthday, I had begun to heal. The pain remained, but it no longer consumed me. Laura's revelation, while shocking, had ultimately reinforced my capacity for endurance, empathy, and emotional growth. I had learned that life could deliver joy and betrayal simultaneously, and that our response to such revelations defines our character far more than the events themselves.